Welcome, everybody. I think we'll get started, and as people join, they'll just join in. Welcome to Censorship in Our Libraries and Schools, Book Banning and Our Freedom to Read. I'm Katie Reiter, and I'm the new National Program Coordinator for Jews for Secular Democracy. My co-moderator tonight is Paul Golin, the staff lead of Jews for Secular Democracy and the executive director of its sponsoring nonprofit, the Society for Humanistic Judaism. We are joined tonight by two dynamic public education activists who I'm really excited about, Hilery Cash and Raegan Miller. Hilery is a Michigan activist and a retired school librarian, also a good old friend of mine. She worked for 38 years in both urban and suburban cities. Hilery also sat on the Coretta Scott King jury for the American Library Association. Since retiring, Hilery remains active in her community, currently serving on a number of boards, including the Oak Park Michigan Library Board of Directors and the nonprofit organizations Women Confronting Racism and Advocate Michigan. Our other guest, Raegan Miller, who is becoming a new friend, is the Director of Development and Finance for Florida Freedom to Read Project, as well as a CPA and a mother of two public school students. Raegan has served in numerous leadership positions for county-wide and statewide pro-public education advocacy organizations. Welcome, Hilery and Raegan. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing your expertise. For everyone who is just joining us, we ask that you remain mute and please put your questions in the chat. I'd also love to see where you're from. So if you just arrived, put where you're sitting and watching this right now. As soon as you put your questions in the chat, we have one of our staff members who's kind of putting them on a Google Doc for us, and we will ask questions as soon as the speakers are done. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Hilery. Hilery, it's all yours.
Okay, I'm new at doing this, so wait 1 second. I got to get out of here and bring up my
Oh, by the way, while we're waiting for Hilery, I'm going to say closed captioning's been enabled. So if you need to do it, go down to the bottom of your screen and enable closed caption for yourself.
Okay, hopefully this will work. Good. Okay. As she said, I have been a children's librarian in elementary schools for 38 years. And have only had one person in all that time have a problem with the books. So I will get to that and tell you my story in a little bit. I have to tell you, To Kill a Mockingbird was a book that really set me apart for learning about diversity and so forth. And it changed my life. So to go on, okay. This is a lot of this at the beginning is from ALA. I love going to American Library Association meetings. I learned so much and buy so many books. Books and beyond, or in 21, it said, I'm going to move this for me myself here. There were 729 challenges, but there were a lot more in 22. And mostly divided with books and graphic novels and textbooks. Some even displays had a issue, especially around LGBTQ. And parents were the ones who went and put in to get books banned and challenged. Some patrons. in the city that I used to work in, we now have Mother of Liberty person on the board. So we're waiting to hear what she is going to do. As you see here, the challenges take place mostly in school libraries and in public schools. These were the 2020 most challenged books. One of my favorite books is Stamped, and look at all these, and some of them are phenomenal. This George book, it changed its name to Melissa when it was talking about a trans child. Okay. A challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict materials based upon the objections of a person or a group. A banning is the removal of those materials. Challenges do not simply involve a person expressing a point of view. Rather, they are an attempt to remove materials from the curriculum or libraries, thereby restricting, oh, I can't read my own thing here. Got to move this, access for others. I believe books, personally, I believe children need books that look like them and are about them. And when I started school, it was Dick and Jane. And now there are so many books. And being on the jury for the Coretta Scott King, I learned more and more about the African American society and what goes on in their society. Intellectual freedom is the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It provides for free access to all expressions of ideas through which any and all sides of a question, cause, or movement may be explored. Each city, each state has an intellectual freedom group, as well as the whole country under ALA. Censorship is the suppression of ideas and information that certain persons, individuals, groups, or government officials find objectionable or dangerous. It is no more complicated than someone saying, don't let anyone read this book or buy that magazine or view that film because I object to it. In the 1930s, of course, with Adolf Hitler, he didn't want people to have any ideas that were not German in his and his cultural German literature, especially Jews. And they started burning the books and ransacking universities and so forth. And that started a whole wave of censorship and about racial superiority. When responding to a challenge, most libraries, if they don't have one, they should locate their policy, written request for reconsideration. So they pass out a written or a computerized version of the written to the person who wants these books removed. And then as a librarian, you are to pull together a committee, give the guidelines to the committee, and have a challenge hearing. That could take, 2 or 3 weeks to put together. Many right now, I'm sorry to say, are the LGBTQ characters in books and so forth. And what we see so much is that these are the children, the youth that are committing suicide the most also. And so they need books that look and sound like that. And there's all different ones that they could use. I read a book a few years ago in my book club, written by a mom of a trans child. And it was a fictionalized book of their life, but it was so good. And it just brought out so much that I needed to learn about trans children. This is about Michigan, and we've had one library that really went off. They couldn't get money to back them, so they closed down. Pen America is an excellent source of looking up books for that are being banned and so forth. We have a few places here and there in Michigan. I'm afraid it's going to get worse before it gets better in Michigan, even though we now have a Democratic House and Senate, and our three top positions in our state are Democrats, but it is going to get worse. These are some of the books that they have banned. Oh, here she comes. Gracie. The mouse is being, Gracie, come here. Come here. Come here. I told you she would start. It's a graphic novel, and it is done with mice and rats. And one of the reasons it's being tried to taken out is one of the mice are naked. And so there are all different reasons for that. And the Anne Frank Diary is pretty new, and it's a graphic novel. And Number of the Stars is a children's book. And where I used to teach, we read it to our fourth graders. Jodi Picoult's The Storyteller, which is about the Holocaust, was just taken off I think in Florida. And Judy Blume is because of the author being Jewish. So some of these books are being banned because the author is being Jewish, and the other is the about the Holocaust motion. This one, in Mississippi, the assistant principal was fired for reading this book to the second graders. And of course, Black and brown authors are being touched upon too and having problems. Now, this is the book that I had when I was working. This is a first grade read, and it's called The Perfect Family, and it's about a family of pigs who live next door to a family of rabbits. And the little pig, Luann, went to stay with the family of rabbits, and she was so excited because she knew she would have a lot of playmates. But by the time the night ended, she was exhausted because she was used to being by herself. And this mom who wanted this book off the shelf was upset because she had a large family, and she thought it was saying how awful large families are. But in the book itself, it says, whatever family you're in is the perfect family for you. So we had 6 people or so trying in our group talking about it. And of course, we didn't take it off the shelf. But that was her issue, was having a large family, and she wanted to be heard. I mean, I've had people come up to me and say, when Harry Potter just came out, they wanted me to take those off the shelf and so forth. So I said to this mom, I said, have you read the book? She says, no. the church told me to take it off. So I said, why don't you go back and read it and then come to me if you have a problem with it, and then we can discuss it. She never did. These are just some things to do to get people involved in talking about banned books and reading banned books and so forth. I love the happy hour thing for people to do banned books and so forth. When I've done this in person, I've done it in a library, and I've put the banned books out in the library so people can find them. And I had a bingo card, and they could fill the bingo card up with as they found the books. And that was always a good way of people looking at the books. Be the change. Put a group together. Communicate, listen, have a graphics team, bring in public speakers, and spread the news. And here are some groups I went to get my information. Red, Wine, and Blue is a national organization, but we now have a group going in Michigan just recently. Of course, there's American Library Association and Michigan Education Association, and videos for freedom to learn. And PEN America is a great one to look up information on. And this Distill Social is a lot like Red, Wine, and Blue, but it's a local one. And this Moms for Liberty is the group that are trying to get most of the books off the shelves. And that's the end.
Hilery, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. If you can unshare your screen.
Yes, I'm going to. How do you do that? Stop share would help.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. We're going to go right to Raegan next, and then we'll take questions after Raegan has shared. Raegan, you have the floor.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay, make sure I'm not on mute. Thank you so very much for having me tonight. My name is Raegan Miller. I am one of the 3 members of the Florida Freedom to Read Project. So just wanted to tell you, who we are. And I probably could talk for the entire hour about what we're seeing in Florida. I won't, I promise you, but I will jump around. So feel free, drop questions in the chat, because I know there will likely be many of them. But our group was founded, if you look at this picture, I'm the one in the middle. The 2 are Jen and Stefana are my colleagues, and they are the founders of Florida Freedom to Read. They are public school parents in Orlando. They went to a school board meeting in October of 2021, and the equivalent of Moms for Liberty, the Proud Boys, were at that school board meeting, and they read excerpts of a book, just 2 pages or whatever, and, showed their outrage and, got this book banned and pulled in from Orange County Public Schools. So the 2 of them looked at each other and said, this is not wrong. This is not right. It is not going to stop here. And we have to stop this. And that became their mission. I live on the other coast of Florida from them. And I've always been very involved in public education, a big advocate for public education. And, I have run a school board campaign for a friend and done a lot of work. So I had a lot of connections and got involved with them immediately. So I will tell you, we're a 501c4, and, here's our mission statement, that we support the success of K through 12 public education, and we want to improve public education by uniting and empowering teachers and students and parents in support of access to information in our classrooms and libraries. So we truly believe that we are, that the education belongs to the student, and obviously parents have a right and should be involved in their students' education, but that we want to hold all of our legislators and leaders accountable for providing that high quality, safe education that is in Florida's Constitution. So with that being said, since we are a 501c4, we are allowed to get political and speak out and support, those candidates. Not, we don't have to be partisan, but we support those candidates that are committed to protecting access and inclusiveness in our libraries. And how we've done this work is we file a lot of public records requests and find out where censorship is happening. Initially, we were just going out there and casting wide nets, trying to figure out what was going on because we were hearing about it. And so we just started asking a lot of questions, and probably led us to one of our biggest stories, which I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was in Duval County. And I'm sure many of you have heard about the Roberto Clemente book. I'll tell you briefly that this would have been January of 22. Duval County is one county where Black students are actually the majority of students in public school system there. And what was happening was their literacy rates were dropping, and they wanted to find a way to reach those kids. And, just like Hilery said, kids need to see themselves reflected in books. And so they reached out and did this, they bought this Essential Voices collection so that they could hear, so that kids could see themselves. And around that same time, which I'm going to talk about, HB 7, which is our Stop Woke Act, started floating. Hold on one second. Sorry, my family just walked in. I'm sorry for all the noise in the background. So HB 7 was starting to circulate, and with our legislature is, the majority is Republican. We have a Republican governor, and everybody knew that this bill was going to pass. And what it did was it said, HB 7 basically says you're not allowed to, to teach anything that might make a kid feel uncomfortable because of their race. And so this made Duval County very uncomfortable. So this is where we get into that. And they pulled that whole collection off their shelves. And it was a very expensive investment that they just let sit for like a year. Eventually, a lot of those books made it through review and got back on shelves, but a lot of them were sent back to the publishers, and some of them were traded out in light of these bills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how we got here with these bills. So last year there were 3 bills, which I talked about. HB 7 is the Stop Woke Act, which prohibits any instruction that might make a child feel guilty. And then we have HB 1557, which is the Parental Rights in Education, or affectionately referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill. And what that one does is, even though it sounds very innocent, it's very vague. It says it prohibits public schools from having classroom discussion or giving classroom instruction about sexual orientation or gender identity from kindergarten to 3rd grade. And so those topics were not being taught in those grades. And then the next part of the law said, or until it's really, age appropriate. And this bill really had like a chilling effect on teachers. All of a sudden, everybody was like, well, I don't know what this means. Am I allowed to tell someone that I have a same-sex spouse? Am I, are we allowed to talk if a child comes up and says, I have 2 moms? If a sibling is part of the LGBTQ community, nobody really understood what this meant. And we really still to this day haven't gotten a really great clarification from the Florida Department of Education on this bill. In fact, the great favor that they have done us this year is they are trying to expand this bill to further to grades 8 and then possibly to grades 12, so that you can no longer talk about these things. And so, I'm sure that you've read stories in the press where, safe space stickers were removed, and, teachers were taking their pictures down. Some teachers were being fired for saying things. So that was that bill that's very vague. And then the final bill from last year was 1467, which is the Curriculum Transparency Bill. And what that did was it required our Department of Education to develop an online training for media specialists. And the Department of Education had until 12/31/22 to come up with this training. And what they did was they put out a call to superintendents across the state and said, hey, nominate some parents, because, clearly they're for parental rights. And we're going to put them, we're going to put them on this training development team, for lack of a better term, and they'll help develop the training with the media specialists. And what really happened was none of those people that were nominated by superintendents were selected. There were 4 parents that were selected. I believe 2 were Moms for Liberty. 1 was a very well-known book banner in Indian River County. And there's an organization, there's a few very extreme organizations, Florida Citizens Alliance. They basically put in a name for one that they wanted to be part of this training program. And Moms for Liberty got their people in. And then No Left Turn in Education also has a pretty strong presence here in Florida. So they were very vocal in working on this. Now, we got lucky. We had great media specialists that pushed back, and the training, it came out this year. It was passed in January. And it's not a terrible training. It still allows the Miller test, which I can talk about a little bit, which is a Supreme Court decision. It allowed that to stay in place. And it's a 3-pronged test. And so the first part of that is whether the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. That's the first prong. Whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct or excretory functions specifically defined by applicable state law. And then the final prong of this test is whether the work taken as a whole lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value. And it has to meet all 3 of these tests. So I'll give The Bluest Eye as an example. It's very hard for them to look at that book in its entirety and say that they want to pull that. So we got to keep the Miller test as part of this training. The unfortunate part of this training was that there's a voiceover that talks through this training. It's an online training. You can go to the Florida Department of Education, fldoe.org, and see this training. There's a voiceover, and they tell people to err on the side of caution. And they also, in the training, talk about teachers being subject to 3rd-degree felonies if they're found to be, giving information that could be potentially harmful to minors. So again, huge chilling effect. Obviously, the Florida Department of Education does not have the right to charge any teacher with a felony, but the fact that that's in there and this err on the side of caution language has definitely led to chaos over the past few months in this state. And what we saw in my own home county, which I'm in a pretty large county, it's very purple. And The Bluest Eye was probably, a few books had been pulled, but this was really the big story here. The Bluest Eye got pulled out of an AP 11th grade class from one parent complaint. She did not actually file a formal complaint, but she raised a stink. They moved the book from the class in that particular school. And then the district used the DOE's language and said, we have no choice but to err on the side of caution. We have to protect our teachers. And so then, interestingly enough, in the last 2 or 3 days, actually 3, there's a movie on Ruby Bridges, and they sent out a permission slip for people to sign, and all parents except for one signed this permission slip. So that student was moved and not allowed to participate. And that one parent has now decided to file a formal complaint against Ruby Bridges, the movie. And that has now been removed from any curriculum until it can be further reviewed. So that's, and then I wanted to share with you all, because this also happened this morning, which is extremely relevant. Because of my work in advocacy, I'm very close to many teachers. And one of them posted this morning that just wanted everyone to know that a parent complained to one of our teachers about a reading from a comprehension assignment that had an excerpt from the Diary of Anne Frank. She said it was, quote, inappropriate. In it, Anne was worrying about school and some other mundane things, and not a single word about the Holocaust. But that's really where we are in Florida, is that in throughout the state, one single parent, one single community member, raises their voice or files this, complaint, and the books are gone. And so, because the laws are very vague and they're seeking to expand them every day, each district is applying things differently. So in Clay County, for example, you might have read about that. No Left Turn in Education has they have one very outspoken member, and he has promised to challenge something like 3,000 books. And we put copies of his challenge forms online. And as Hilery said, it's primarily anything that, might be about an LGBTQ child, he says that that's indoctrination, it has to go. Black students, they will cite, the Stop Woke Act. In other counties, they're doing a better job. They're letting books go through the review process. And what we're finding is that when the books do go through the review process, they have a better chance of making it back to the shelves. When the districts follow the process, instead of this vague err on the side of caution, that you get a group of people together, they talk about it, and the books stay on the shelves. So what I know, probably some of you saw, our governor spoke, I guess it's been 2 weeks now. He did a whole press conference saying that book banning is a hoax, and that it's not happening, and that it's only been a few books, and that they were pornography. And so I don't want to assure you, but I do want to tell you that we have logged over 2,000 censorship attempts in our state since we formed in October of 2021. Those are 1,000, it's over 1,000 unique books. And so these books are definitely being pulled from shelves every single day. We spend several hours of every day going through and, tracking these challenges and trying to figure out what's happening. And I think I mentioned before that we do that. We've got people throughout the state. We have media specialists, we have parents, we have concerned citizens that attend the school board meetings. They speak out in favor of our books and they tell us what's going on. And the three of us are trying to stay on top of watching all the Department of Education meeting, all the school board meetings, and, watch what's going on in the legislature this year, which I'll tell you, they are, I'll go through some of the bills that are happening this year. So some of, this first one, I'll give you numbers, but it's House Bill 1463, and it's got a companion 1620 in the Senate. That one wants to restrict electronic devices, cell phones, and put warnings on them, which, we obviously agree. We'd all love our children to have less access to cell phones, but this one goes very far beyond that. And it assumes that all parents in all communities desire the same amount of restriction. Warning labels are on cell phones now for adults to read before. This is what this bill would do before purchasing digital devices. It's restricting students and parents from sharing images taken during school hours and limiting the instruction on electronic devices through 8th grade. And our stance is, again, we don't want kids using cell phones in school, but we're curious what is the impact of that, when they go to high school and they are required to use more on technology. And so it also changes the definition of harmful to minors and in this bill, and it would actually bar an adolescent from attending a PG-13 movie here in our state. Some other ones that are coming through, like I mentioned earlier, the parental rights in education, or the Don't Say Gay bill. We have a bill, like I mentioned, that is going to expand that. It would stretch that to 8th grade, and it would prohibit schools from using inclusive pronouns, so that a child could not tell them, that they use different pronouns, no, they, them, it's either he, she, and it would be basically based on the gender, the sex that they are assigned at birth. And then we have HB 1069, and this basically is a full-on promoting book banning. It expands the book bans by allowing anyone in the county to object to school members because they depict or describe sexual conduct. And it removes local school district discretion over sex ed in favor of state level mandates by the Department of Education. And the bill narrowly defines sex and bans teaching about HIV and STDs and sex ed before 6th grade. So potentially any female that, might start their period before 5th grade would not, they would not be allowed to talk to a student about that. And it basically denies the existence of LGBTQ people. And it says that gender roles or reproductive roles are, quote, binary, stable, and unchangeable. And then finally, one of the last bills I'll talk about is House Bill 999 and Senate Bill 266. And this would ban our universities from offering any courses related to women and gender studies, critical race theory, or intersectionality, and effectively undoes the tenure system here in Florida. And it shifts all university faculty hiring to the boards of trustees, which again, if you're following what's going on in Florida, our boards of trustees are stacked with political appointees, and it would ban considering diversity or equity in hiring or promotion. And any programs or campus activities that support diversity, equity, inclusion, or critical race theory are defunded, and it would, threaten every state's university LGBTQ support programs. So that is, in a nutshell, where we are in Florida. It's not pretty, and it's contrary to a party of small government. It's definitely very overreaching. Teachers, I will tell you, are very stressed. I spoke to a media specialist yesterday. I just brought them a card and thanked them for what they were doing, because I know they're getting ready to have to catalog all of their classroom libraries. And any of you who have been, and I would say this is primarily impacts elementary school, those libraries, I will just say they're little libraries of love. Teachers collect those through the years. And in Florida, every minute of every day in a public school is, relegated by the law. So my elementary school's child has to spend 180 minutes every single day on ELA. So when he's done with whatever assignment or the teacher's working with someone else, he has the option to go pick a book from that classroom library. And what they're making them do is put them all into a system, and then they have to be approved. These are not taxpayer funded libraries. These are funded by parents, by teachers, by community members. And a media specialist now has to go through the training that they've gone through and determine which of those books can stay and which can go. And, I know some people will say this is simple. You just scan a book and we approve or don't approve. But these books have been collected over the years, and it's, somebody's going to have to go through, re-review these books, look at them. It's going to be extremely time consuming. And what I see happening is, instead of doing this, a lot of these books are just going to be removed. And these classroom libraries are going to become small, and students are just really, truly not going to have access to really very many books. So in a state where our literacy rates are not very impressive, it's really a shame that we wouldn't be doing everything possible to get books into the hands of kids.
Raegan, thank you so much. Thank you.
That's
so
a lot.
much.
I'm sorry. It's a lot.
No. I mean, we have a whole bunch of questions that have come in from everybody. I have a whole bunch of questions. I'm sure, Paul, you have a bunch of questions. I want to start with the very first question I saw someone write was, why can't the Michigan legislature stop the book banning? Having worked in the Michigan legislature myself, I'm going to answer that one. Call your representative and your senator, because legislatures can do things just like we're seeing them do it in Florida. So whatever state you're in, this is how, if you want to do something, call your state legislature, request a meeting. You can do it in person or on Zoom, and talk to them about what's happening with book banning in your state and what they can do at the state level to ensure our freedom to read for our children.
I'm going to jump in with a question. First of all, thank you both. That was really informative and disturbing. I mean, this is a really challenging aspect of life in America today. So I really appreciate the context and background that you gave us. One of the questions that I saw was about which church, and I think this is an opportunity to kind of step back and address why we're having this conversation, because we didn't really do an in-depth intro. We just kind of wanted to jump into the topic. So I realized that we have also, we're getting a lot of folks who have been with us on previous webinars, which is wonderful, but inevitably, and I hope there are some folks who are here for the first time. So let me just say that this is a webinar of an initiative called Jews for a Secular Democracy. And the reason that we have conversations like this one is because we feel the separation of church and state is under threat today, more than it has been in recent memory. And we feel that Jews have a unique voice to bring to the advocacy of separation of church and state, because we were not always the beneficiaries of a fair system. In most cases now, we're in a different place and we are able to advocate from a position of privilege, but the things that happen to the Jewish community, the discrimination in the past, we don't want to see happen to others. And even just from your own presentations, it's clear that Jews are still targeted in certain ways. And, I followed the banning of mouse fairly closely, and it really does seem more out of ignorance than anti-Semitism, but still, you know, like, where is the border there? So what I wanted to kind of get at was naming who's driving this agenda of wanting to ban books. And is it, and I will put out the name that we've been using, which is white Christian nationalism. It's not all Christians. It's not even a majority of Christians, but is a subset of Americans who believe our government should be run based on Christian law and privilege Christian people. And they're enacting laws to enshrine that in our legal system. And that's what we're pushing back, but it's not just them. So what are you seeing as far as who are these folks? Are they really coming with a Christian fundamentalist banner that they're waving, or is it that upfront, or is it more subtle? Is it a mix of different people, or is that really who's at the forefront of this? Who's driving this?
Do you want me to give you, I mean, we have
Sure.
We have a few organizations, you know, the Florida Citizens Alliance, they all claim Christianity, which is offensive, because it's the polar opposite of what Christianity is. But their actions certainly, like I said, they're certainly not acting as I would expect a Christian to be. But they do, some of them do claim, we have a lot of people that come up and, you know, talk about burning in hell at school board meetings. I probably didn't mention before, but if you are on Twitter, follow us at Florida Freedom to Read, and we happily share clips of what these people say during school board meetings so that you can see. So Moms for Liberty was founded here in Florida. I think Florida is an interesting case because I really think they put out the bat signal for these people and brought them all here. We have Florida Citizens Alliance, No Left Turn in Education, Moms for Liberty. There's, which nationally is Americans for Prosperity, but we have our own little subset of Floridians for Prosperity. And you see these groups, I mean, they bus people up to Tallahassee, they put them all in their t-shirts and have them sit in on committee meetings. I mean, they're well-funded, well-organized. Moms for Liberty was founded just south of me in Sarasota. In fact, one of their founders was testifying in Congress today. You know, claiming parental rights while wanting to, you know, and they say they don't want to ban books, but it's really fascinating to hear some of their talking points. The Bluest Eye, for example, they said that the book was about pedophilia. And if any of you have read The Bluest Eye, there is no one in their right mind who's read that entire book that ever would say that that book is about pedophilia. And so, yeah, and they're under the guise of always harming, that we're doing stuff that's harmful to children. So those are probably the big ones that I can think of.
How about you, Hilery? What are you seeing in Michigan?
For me, it's the DeVos family who have brought in people who talk about Biden not winning and so forth, and has a distaste for public schools. And that's mostly what they're all about, is a distaste for public schools and want to do the most to get people out of going into public schools.
And what do you think they fear about public education?
They want to make money, is really what it comes down to for the DeVosses. You know, her brother was head of the mercenaries for Afghanistan. And also she wants to make money, and that's where it's coming from, is to be paid for private schools.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot. It's certainly, we know about the DeVos family, but also I think in general, the phenomenon is about control and power.
Mm-hmm.
And as everyone knows, with knowledge comes power, and they don't want folks to have access to it. And also, frankly, with education comes more liberal values, I would argue. I think that can be demonstrated scientifically, and that's why there's a war on college as well, because people hear different perspectives, and hearing different perspectives inevitably makes you question the single-minded focus that you may have grown up with. So these are all threats, I think, to a Christian nationalist agenda, but it is remarkable how successful they've been at kicking up this dust storm. And I think, Raegan, when you talk about them being buffed up, wearing the same t-shirts, and how incredibly organized they are, and I saw someone in the chat talk about that as well, we've got to get more organized, even though, you know, they put us on defense, but we need to get more organized about how we counter this.
Yeah, I want to switch sides a little bit. We've all been talking about, you know, kind of the causes and reasons for book banning. I'd like to ask the question of, what does book banning and reading censorship, how does that contribute to racism, anti-Semitism, LGBTQ hate, anti-minority, anti-Jewish history? How does once books are banned, how does that impact children and our community as a whole in relation to all those issues?
Again, it goes back to what Paul said, it's knowledge. And the lack of. I was watching Jeopardy one day, and the way one of the contestants spoke was he read children's books. And that's how he got his answers for the questions, because children's books are very concise, nonfiction and fiction. And that's where he got his information from. You don't have to read a whole long, book to get information. And I've been teaching in Michigan for, as I said, 38 years. I've been on the diversity committee for my town that I was working in for over 30 years. And books have to look like children. And I just don't understand where the racism and so forth comes in. If you, I mean, talking about what Raegan talked about was the movie about, what did she say? What was it, Raegan?
Ruby Bridges.
Ruby Bridges. I have 5 different books in the library, all dealing with Ruby Bridges. A new one came out and it was banned lately. I also have 1,600 children's books in my basement, all dealing with diversity, all developed with diversity. And one of the books is called Everyone is Welcome. And they're trying to ban this book because there's 2 fathers. It's just a picture of 2 fathers. It's as simple or as hardcore as that. And people don't want to have other people look at books that are different than them, where our children need books that look like them. It's called A Mirror and a Window.
Yeah. I mean, someone had mentioned in the chat, Lance, about, didn't it start with the conservative moral majority under Reagan, and, where's the resistance been these past 40+ years? I mean, the reality is on many of these social issues, liberalism was winning, the country has become much more liberal. And even when they do surveys today, 70% of Americans support gay marriage. This is truly a minority, and a small minority, that has grabbed power through a variety of ways, including gerrymandering and so on. And now it's a reactionary wave that we're seeing to the progress that has been made on LGBTQ equality. So, the good news is we're actually far better than where we were 40 years ago on LGBTQ equality, but we're now having to deal with this incredibly powerful reactionary wave. And I mean, we didn't even get to the Supreme Court, which is now entrenched in this. And so part of the conversation moving forward is how to advocate and educate and make change while circumventing the legal system in some ways, because if it goes all the way to the top, it's going, there's a Christian nationalistic Supreme Court. So, some of the things that are happening on the local level, and that's why we're so glad to have this conversation with you, is this battle now is genuinely on the local level, on the school boards, in the schools, as well as on city councils and then state legislatures as well. So while there are like encouraging signs in Michigan and very discouraging signs in Florida about that, everyone here can get involved on the local level to really share their viewpoints and kind of counter what is being said and done. But unfortunately, it's these folks on the far right who are highly motivated to not just share their opinion, but enforce their views on other people.
If you live in Southeast Michigan and you would like to go about putting together a group, please text me and I would be happy to chair it. I'll put my email address in the chat.
People can also email me and I will forward
Right.
emails to you. We also are starting a Michigan Jews for a Secular Democracy group, and I'm going to let Nomi speak to that in just a minute. What I wanted to quickly ask is, okay, so we talked about reasons that's happening and consequences. So we're getting to what can we do about it? And I had someone email me ahead of this saying they live in what they feel is a safe area. And can they, Raegan, this question was really to you. Would it be helpful for them to ship books down to Florida? And if so, was that, who should they ship them to? I'm going to let you answer the question. I want to answer the first part of, I don't believe there is any really safe area. So I would suggest to everybody that they get active in their local school district, even if your kids are long gone, find out what's happening and make sure people who believe in freedom to read are elected to the school board.
Yeah, absolutely. I lived in a very blue district. I'm sorry, purple. And every year we voted, our county has been the deciding, we always vote for who wins the presidential election, which is interesting. And we got annihilated this year. I mean, even in the governor's race, the candidate on the Democratic side was from my county, and he probably got beat by 10 points here. And I will tell you, one of our sitting Moms for Liberty school board members who won put out a post before she was a candidate that said she used the swastika and said something about, it was about masks and referring to the masks were like Nazi Germany. And then she said, and she spelled out Auschwitz, OUCHWITS, or whatever it's called. And our local newspaper ran an article on her. You can look this up, Dawn Peters, that she was unfit to sit on the school board and she still won her race. That's where we are. So yes, we will take your book donations. We, in fact, I do strongly, and I will email you photos. You can share them with your group. We actually, there's a couple things I'll tell you we've done. We do distribute books. We try to table at events. We're working really, really hard. We've gotten really, really busy lately. We actually hosted a read-in in Tallahassee on Tuesday. And we had 4 authors, 4 students, Equality Florida, Democracy Forward, PEN America was with us, the Florida Library Association, FEA, all these organizations, and we had tons of press. We had press from France, press from Germany. It's interesting that the other countries are watching more than our own country. So that was great. And we also did file a petition. We are not the lead petitioners. We gave it to FEA because they're the ones who are more harmed by what's going on. Our teachers are, to say that basically the DOE has really overstepped with this media training. And so we've got a petition in court. I used to believe that DeSantis was like Pac-Man and he just got stronger every time somebody sued him. But, we know that basically by his, this book banning is a hoax. He knows it's unpopular. So we need to be loud. We need as many people amplifying our voices, especially nationally. So you can help me if you don't live in Florida. Please retweet, tell your friends, sign our petition, send us a book. You can go right on, email me, please pass my contact information if you want to email. If you have an author that wants to come speak, we'll make that happen. But just raise awareness. There are people down in Florida. We're not all crazy. I'm a little embarrassed to tell people sometimes that I live in Florida, but there are people here doing the good fight, and call me. We'll find a way to engage with you. But the most important thing is tell people what's going on. That would be really helpful.
Okay, Raegan, I will, if anyone wants Raegan or Hilary's email address, just email me and I will share it with everybody. Unfortunately, we are at 9 o'clock. I cannot believe how fast these go. I really want to thank everybody for coming, and a special thanks to Raegan and Hilery. You guys, you two were both just amazing. I want to let Nomi Joyrich is going to speak for a minute and tell you our next two events. Nomi, are you around?
Yep, I am. Hello, I am the director of the Michigan JFASD, and we have some really exciting events coming up. We're going to be starting an official chapter. So our virtual, we've had events, but we haven't had like an active chapter of volunteers. So we want to start that. And our kickoff event is on March 28th at 7 p.m. I really hope people, any Michigan people here can join us. We're going to learn more about JFASD and brainstorm what our next steps are going to be. And on April 29th, we're having an in-person event that will also be broadcast on Zoom as well. And that is going to be a Havdalah service and a conversation about religion government separation in Michigan today with Senator Rosemary Bear and President Pro Tem Senator Jeremy Moss. And that's going to be at Congregation for Humanistic Judaism.
And it will also be on a webinar. So I think it will be,
Yeah.
wouldn't you agree that it will be actually really informative to people really all over the country to talk about?
It will be. I think, Michigan people will obviously have a special interest in it. And I want to give a shout out to Chuck Newman, because I see he's on the call and he does a lot with Distill Social, and Distill Social is one of the co-sponsors of that event. And I also want to give a shout out to all the educators and school board people who are on this call, so I know Teresa Rich from Oakland County Schools is here. I don't know what other educators and school board people are on here, but thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. And I'm going to put my contact info in the chat as well. Thank you.
And again, anyone who needs to reach Nomi, y'all have my email address from this event. Feel free to email me and I will pass it all along. I think we are all done. I again thank you to everyone, and thank you all for coming. And this will be on our YouTube channel. So if you have friends who want to watch this, I will send you an email with the link as soon as it's posted in a few days. But we also have, I think, over 30 videos on there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and you'll get a notice when a new thing is put up. So I will send you a link to our YouTube channel, and everyone have a wonderful night.
Thanks so much, everybody. Take care.